Lead me to some soul today. Oh, teach me.
Welcome,
Lord,
everyone,
just
to
what to
episode number
say.
39 of a series of episodes that we've been calling Leading Others to Christ. As you know, those of you that have been listening during these episodes, we're going to be focused on evangelism. One of our goals, and we have several, but one of them is really to stir our audience up, to stir them up to love and good works, but especially in the area of reaching our family, our friends, our neighbors with the gospel of Christ. My name is Dan Barker, and I preach for the Creekside Church of Christ in Franklin, Indiana, where I also serve as one of the shepherds. For those of you that don't know, I don't know if I keep doing this or not, but those of you that don't know, Franklin is about 20 miles south of downtown Indianapolis. And that gives you a little a visual there, if you will, of where we're located. Those of you that know me know that I'm passionate about our subject today, and I have been ever since I obeyed the gospel when I was 21 years old in Owensboro, Kentucky. And I've always wanted to be a teacher. If you'd ask me, you know how when you were little, sometimes people say, when I was a kid, they called me Danny. They'd say, Danny, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I can remember in the fourth grade saying, I want to be a basketball coach. And then later I learned that I had to be a teacher to be able to do that. So I've been a teacher and a coach, if you will, for my whole, almost my whole life, certainly my whole career. And I see myself more as a teacher than a preacher. But but I've always strived to want to learn how to do this better. And I'm still a work in progress, but especially in evangelism, use some Bible phrases, how to teach others, how to sow the seed, how to be a fisher of men and women, how to persuade, how to teach others to teach, remembering what Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:2. And the things you've heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. And then later in the chapter, he talks about encouraging Timothy to be useful for the master, prepared for every good work. So, in just thinking about all of that, came up with this idea of interviewing people. And this is one of my COVID projects, if you will, and to learn how to do Zoom and do these, but to think about who are the ones that are out there that are doing this, the men, the women, the fellow workers who are reaching and leading others to Christ, and to talk to them and see why they're so motivated. What tools are they using, um, and and to find out where they're working and the community that they're working in, and so thus this series of episodes. And uh, enough about me. We're excited today to have with us somebody that I'm convinced that we can learn a lot from. And so I've done this every time too. I encourage you, unless you're driving, listening to this, get out pen and paper so you can make some notes. Um, but we're happy to have with us today Shane Scott. Welcome, Shane.
Well, it is great to be with you today, Dan. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Well, good. I was thinking, and of course, we reminisced a little bit, and we don't have time to go into all of our connections, but it's interesting. We've got a lot of connections for our past, but I know we first met, I guess, years ago in Lexington, Kentucky, when you were in Winchester and I was in Lexington, and I have to do a little bit. But you also went to college, Florida College, with our daughter Kim Barker, and our future son-in-law at the time, Ted Butler, and then you also currently our youngest granddaughter, Jensen Butler, who's in her first year of teaching there in the Tampa area. She's worshiping with you guys there at Del Rico. So
Yeah.
yeah, lots of connections here. But you know, I start every episode out with Shane, what I call it's like the old elevator pitch, a short bio. Tell everybody. A lot of people know who Shane Scott is, but there's people that don't know Shane. But a lot of people don't know who Dan Barker is. But but tell, if you would, take a few minutes here and tell everybody where you were born and how you learned the truth and where you are now. Kind of bring everybody up to speed.
Sure. I was born in Winchester, Kentucky, and lived there all of my growing up years. And one of the key spiritual influences in my life was a preacher named Paul Johnson. For a long time, we drove over to Lexington and worshiped over at the University Heights Church when I was a kid. And then the summer, I think between my 5th and 6th grade year, we started the church in Winchester, and Paul Johnson was our first preacher. And as somebody who grew up without a father, he not only was my preacher, but he really did become a father figure in my life. And he and his family just embraced me and took me under their wing. And it was then in my later teenage years when I became a Christian. And there's probably no preacher that's had more of an influence on me just in the person I am than Paul. And so I'm always going to be indebted to him and to his family. And then I went away and attended Florida College, as you said. And then after I finished there, I came back to Central Kentucky and started preaching full time. First out in the country in Montgomery County. Now, people in other places don't get this, but in Kentucky, we go by county more than we do by town. So I grew up in Clark County, and then I started preaching in Montgomery County at a little church out in the county called Oak Hill. And then from there, moved up to Northwest Indiana to a town called Portage and preached up there for 6 years. And then taught at Florida College for 3 years, and then moved back to the Chicago area to the city of Elgin, Illinois, and preached there for 4, and then down to Nashville and preached there for 8.5 years, and married my wife, Christy. We were students together. It just took us about 25 years to figure out that nobody else would have us, so we should have each other. So we got married there in Tennessee, and then we moved here just a little over 7 years ago. We came to Valrico. One of my dear mentors, Marty Pickup, preached here for many years. And after he suddenly passed away, Christy and I felt like maybe this was a place where we could go and be of some help. But then when we came here, Christy had a bout of cancer up in Nashville. And when we moved here, her cancer came back. And it turned out these people we thought we were coming to help instead were a great help to us and lifted us up during the extent of her illness. And then after she passed away, have continued to lift me up and support me. And so just love the people here a great deal. And that's pretty much my life story so far.
Well, yeah, you're just a kid, right? You're just what, 53? How old are you?
That's exactly right. I'm 53.
Yeah. See, how often has anybody told you that you're a kid lately?
Well, it's a funny thing you asked that. After Bible study a couple of weeks ago, I was one of the college kids came up to me and had a question. And one of our little kids, whose name is Gabe, came up to us and he asked me how old I was. And I said, well, how old do you think I am? And he said 106. So, and then I asked him how old he thought the college student was, and he said 19. So he's got a pretty accurate gauge, right? Wow. So
that's great. The out of the mouth of babes, right?
That's right. That's right.
I try to do this during the interviews. I've got several things, obviously, that I want to cover, but just several things that you mentioned there, I have to address just a little bit because our life is about relationships. And of course, we're talking about from an evangelism, talking about relationship with God and Jesus and the whole spiritual family conversation. But just the ones in our lives that you mentioned, Paul Johnson. Is Paul? I don't know. Is Paul still alive?
No, he actually passed away several years ago. He had Alzheimer's, and he passed away. I'm sorry, I can't remember. It was either 2003 or 2004. Okay. But he passed away back then. Now his wife Betty is still alive and doing well, and she's still there in Winchester, and we keep up with each other on Facebook. And when I get a chance to go back home, every now and then I'll try to look her up and visit with her some and just spend some time with her.
Well, and obviously you're doing that already, but I try to encourage people when I hear things like that. If let's say Paul was still alive, and the fellow that baptized me, he's since passed away. But if they're the people in our lives that have helped us in whatever, if they're still alive, to reach out to them, send them a card, call them if you haven't in a long time, and say, "Hey, thank you so much," because
Yeah.
I don't know where I would be if you hadn't taken that time, especially spiritually, to take the time to show me what the Bible teaches. And I think sometimes people forget to be thankful.
Yes.
That's a Bible subject.
Yeah.
Forget to be thankful. But and then just with Christy, I never had a chance to meet her. I've heard so many great things about her, and I know she was such a helpmate and support for you, and in the work that y'all did together. So again, appreciate that. We had my wife went through a bout of breast cancer, about a year and a half ago. So that's the first time we'd had experienced that. Not cancer in the family before. So anyway, but the relationships that we have, and you mentioned several there, Marty Pickup and Paul Johnson and your wife, and just in the people there in the community now, that is all a part of the conversation about evangelism. It really is. And how all those things connect. And sometimes we can't see the big picture, but here, let's go this way. Why? Shane, why are you doing what you do? Why, of all the things you could have done, why are you involved in preaching and teaching and leading others to Christ? Why? How would you answer that?
Well, it's a weird sort of thing, Dan. When I was in about the 6th grade, I had some cousins that went to a different church, kind of from a different background, but they asked me if I wanted to go to their summer Bible camp. And I said, well, sure. So I went, and this was before I really knew anything like about Florida College and the Florida College camps and that kind of thing. And we were doing one of those Bible drill games, what you do with kids sometimes at a camp. And I hadn't really, my mom was unfaithful to the Lord through most of my childhood. So I didn't grow up going to Bible class regularly. I'm so jealous of these kids today and how good our Bible classes are now compared to, what it was like when I was a kid. But anyway, somehow or another, I did pretty well in that Bible drill game. And the lady, I have no idea who she was, but the lady just said, you ought to be a preacher. And for some reason, that hit my mind, and it was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And then, of course, because I was so close to Paul, and because he was a preacher, it's like any of those strong male figures in your life. I'm sure your interest in coaching was driven in part by maybe a coach you had who was a big influence on you, And so my interest in preaching was also driven by just that relationship with Paul. And although there were many other things I thought about at times, like teaching or maybe law or some of those things, I guess ever since that moment, and when I was in the 6th grade, I just kind of felt like the things that I really enjoy doing, I enjoy studying and trying to figure things out. And I enjoy people, and I enjoy trying to communicate and putting lessons together. All those things just kind of really converge together, to do this work.
Well, and we're so thankful that whoever that lady was, that she planted that seed, right?
Yeah.
But and then the things that keep us motivated, that keep us going, because you and I both know, and this is not being negative, it's just real, but you and I both know the same men that were preaching that are no longer preaching. That for whatever reason, a lot of varied stories of they got discouraged and they quit. But I just think that there's so much that we need to do, and a lot of places this is going on. A lot of the people that we've interviewed, this is part of the community, the culture. Max Dawson out in Texas, that was one of the things he kept mentioning in his interview is the DNA in the culture of the congregation there of reaching out in the community. But we've got to be around like-minded people from that standpoint. I need to be around Shane that is motivated in doing this type work to keep me motivated. Even 74-year-old guys still need to be motivated by the kids of the world. No, but you know, I just and you've got different others in your life that you can think about that have motivated you as well, and we just kind of gravitate toward those kind of people. So that's part of this interview process too. Again, is to keep everybody motivated and stirred up, as I said, to the things we ought to be doing. Tell us a little bit about the church there at Valrico.
Yeah, the church here started, I think, back in the late 80s as a swarm off from the Brandon congregation. If you've ever been down this area, you know that when you get to Brandon, you don't really know when Brandon ends and Valrico begins, you know, so they're close to each other. And then the church here has just steadily grown through the years. Our area just continues to grow, and Florida and Hillsborough County continue to grow. So a lot of that growth has just kind of been just a steady, natural, incline. And then Marty Pickup preached here for 19 years. And of course, Marty was just such a uniquely gifted preacher and teacher. And so just gave the church here such a rich and substantive diet of the Word of God, you know. So then when I came here, I just found a group of people that are incredibly loving and friendly. I like to say in a lot of ways, Valrico is almost like a country church. We have a lot of people who come from that same kind of rural background where I grew up. And yet we also have a mix of, you know, professionals and teachers and, doctors, all that kind of thing. But it's just a really neat group of people that have a lot of love, but also a lot of passion for the Lord. We have a lot of members who are always thinking in terms of evangelism and engagement. And I'll tell you something that's really fascinating to me, Dan, about moving down here. I was in Nashville, which I know at one time per capita had more churches of Christ than any city or county in the country. And a lot of us who have connections down here to Florida College think of Tampa as this great bastion, you know. Yes. But I remember when I moved down here, before we moved, I looked up on the census report to get data about religious adherence, you know, who goes to what kind of religious group. And I found out that in the 2010 census, there were more professed adherents of Hinduism than churches of Christ here in Hillsborough County. So what it told me is that whereas my perception from the inside is that, well, why move to Hillsborough County or Tampa, Florida? They got all kinds of churches down there. The reality is per capita, you know, there's a great need. And it was just a reminder to me that sometimes you can get tunnel vision from your circles, you know, your network of friends can lead you to have a certain kind of tunnel vision about what an area is like that turns out not to be the case. And so when I saw that, I felt like in Nashville, it was kind of hard to get Bible studies from visitors because there were so many congregations that had Church of Christ on the sign that so many people had preconceived notions that it was kind of hard to get a fresh start with people, you know. But so one of the reasons I was interested in moving here was to have a different kind of field to work in. And sure enough, like almost the first Sunday I was here, we had visitors walk in off the street, and we have them all the time, you know, that we've been able to have Bible studies with.
I'm glad you shared that, because that just, you saw my mouth open up when you said that Hinduism. I would not have thought that at all. But, you know, that brings, it's like the political climate that we have today with immigration. And there's so many communities out there that are like that, are pockets of people that have moved in from other countries, and they just like we would gravitate toward other people from our same part of the world.
Right.
And so you've got communities like that are popping up. That's been a fun thing about the interviews. Of interview a Gardner Hall or Caleb Churchill up in New York and Harlem. Well, that's different from Winchester, Kentucky, or different from Franklin, Indiana, and then what you're describing there. Ethan Long Henry out in L.A. and Brent are up in Washington, the state of Washington. So that's a fascinating part of the work too, is the makeup of the community, the makeup of your congregation, and then the makeup of the community. And if let's say Gay and I would visited there, and we were not Christians, but somehow we show up there, right? Mm-hmm. Gay's my wife, and we show up there, and obviously we're interested in spiritual things, or we wouldn't be there. How would you approach us? How would you? I mean, I'm assuming the group would be friendly when we came in.
Yes.
Have you ever heard the horror stories? I know you have. But people they visited someplace and nobody said anything to them. That's just so discouraging. But so what would you do? What would you do with us, Shane? If we were, how would you approach us? Maybe about a study.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. Normally, our group is extremely friendly, but like a lot of churches, we have struggled during this pandemic to figure out. Even things as simple as the logistics of handing out visitors cards. Some people don't want to touch something someone else has touched. So we've been trying to think about different things we could do to kind of get around that. So this past year, I am sure that we've had a lot of opportunities kind of slip through our fingers, and we're trying to think about ways that we can get around it. But under normal circumstances, what would happen is, that we would make contact. We have a pretty good system of getting visitor cards uploaded to our website. So we have work groups that will get that information, and they can send out notes to our visitors and thank them for coming. I will sometimes write a personal note to thank someone for coming. And then in a follow-up, then just ask the couple, hey, Dan and Gay, I just want to thank you for coming to be with us. And I want you to know, if you've got any questions, I'd be glad to sit down and answer those questions. And I'd love to sit down and study with you sometime. And then usually that will be the gateway then to a study with me or with another one of our members.
Well, follow-up is so important, right?
Yes.
It really is. And, this whole conversation of the community and reaching out, and Jesus gave the apostles the Great Commission, we call it, and to go into all the world, and we are to go into our world. Shane Scott has his world, right?
Yeah,
I have my world. Let's talk a minute about, because I know a little bit about Shane, and sometimes hobbies can be a great way to reach people.
Yes.
Share people one of your favorite hobbies, and how you've been able to use that, if you will, in your work.
Well, I have an unusual hobby of singing barbershop quartet style music. And there's an organization called the Barbershop Harmony Society, and it has chapters around the country. And so there you can sing in like a chorus, or you can also sing in a quartet. And I love the way that you describe that. We all have our world. I came to a realization back in about 1996. I was in, one of our kids at church wanted to do like a little community theater, and he asked me if I would be in it, and I said sure. And then there were a lot of people he knew from school and from the community. And then after we did that show, we kind of wanted to hang out and play games. And so I invited people to come to my house. And as it turned out, Dan, the only people who came were people who did not go to church where I preached. Huh. And so all of these people in the room with me were non-churched. As far as I know, they didn't have any religious affiliation. Wow. And I remember feeling weird because it was the first time I had been in a room with non-church people only in years. Because as a preacher, all of my close friends, all of my close relationships were people from the church. And it hit me as I felt weird in that room. I get up every Sunday and tell people how they're supposed to relate to the world. And I never have to do that because
Yes.
I'm isolated from it. So I decided I need to expand my world. So I need to find a hobby, something that will enlarge my circles of influence. And so in 1998, I made a New Year's resolution. I looked up on the website, found the local chapter, which met in a nearby town called Valparaiso, Indiana, and joined that and hoped that it would give me opportunities to talk to people. And it just really has. I've had conversations, extended conversations with barbershoppers in Sweden about the existence of God, people I would have never had a chance to talk to. And I'm not saying that now Christianity is sweeping Sweden, that's not the point.
Right.
But I've had the opportunity to plant seeds in people all around the world because of barbershop. I have had the opportunity to baptize a couple of people, but it's just been so good for me to have now a circle of friendships and relationships that are not just the people I go to church with to have an influence on.
Well, man, just so many things we could say there, but I do a lot of, I call them workshops, weekend gospel meetings where we go in and we talk about things like this, of how to reach out in the community. And hobbies is a great one. Like meetup groups, there's all kind of meetup groups out there of different business groups that you could be a part of to get to know other people in the community. But I've heard you guys sing, and you still have is there this? I don't know how that works. Is it still the same four guys, or?
Yeah. So we, when I moved to Florida, and then another one of the guys in the quartet moved to New York, we knew that was going to make it hard for us to continue to perform together. So
Sure.
we still remain good friends and stay in touch with each other, but we haven't done. We actually did have a show scheduled last year, and then of course the pandemic put the kibosh. And incidentally, that's another thing that kind of came out of this for the sake of the kingdom. There was a time in my life when I did not get many many invitations to go preach other places. And then this kind of barbershop world opened up. So I asked the elders if I could use my gospel meeting time that I wasn't using for anything to go and do some of these shows. And then what I would do is I would try to find a group that was close by, that particularly was smaller, and I would contact them ahead of time and say, hey, I'm coming into the area and my trip is being paid for. I would just love to come and do something for the kingdom. Could I come and preach there? And not everybody could work that in, but like, for example, where Ethan Longhenry is out in California, I came and preached out there one time. I preached a couple of meetings at smaller churches, that maybe would not normally be able to have one. So it was really neat to be able to use the hobby for that purpose as well.
So good. My mind's just going, and I'm out of time, I know, but we may need to do a follow-up, because that's and somebody might say, what are they talking about? Well, it's, for example, Paul, he was, what did he do for a living? He made tents with Will and Priscilla, right? I mean, do you think there was any conversations that came up when people come in wanting to get a new tent or get their tent? Yeah, it's just so many conversations we could have there. Let's just to kind of speed up here a little bit, but tell us, I call them a conversion story. Have you got a story of somebody that you studied with that ended up obeying the gospel that everybody would find interesting?
Yeah, there was some friends of mine through barbershop, and it was really interesting. The young lady came from what you might call a spiritual but not religious background. And she started dating a friend of mine who was very committed in his faith, and he was nervous about it. And we talked, and I said, well, the fact that she's interested in you and she knows the kind of person you are, maybe that means she's looking and she's searching. And it turned out she was. And this was certainly not like a one-person effort. There were multiple influences coming to her at the same time. She started to read C.S. Lewis and kind of fell in love with him and kind of his way of thinking. And then we would do, because they live elsewhere, we would do Zoom or FaceTime studies. And she had a lot of questions as a person who's unreligious. So, I mean, a lot of basic fundamental questions that we would just kind of talk through and work through those things. And eventually it worked out to where I was able to baptize her. And it was like about as close to like conversion stories from the book of Acts, where you're encountering people who are not religious at all, certainly not Christian from any standpoint of influence of Christianity, and like almost going from ground zero to becoming a disciple of Jesus. So,
yeah. Just the fact that you're in Florida and I'm in Indiana, and we can do this live and see each other, just the tools that we have today is another conversation, and learning how to use these tools to be able to, like Gardner Hall the other day said that almost every night he has a Zoom study, Bible study, and the people are in Honduras. I mean, they're all around the world. And just like what you said there. All right, we close it out, Shane, with what I call the one thing. So somebody's been listening to this, and you've stirred them up, thinking about some things, and there's more than one thing to learn how to be involved in leading others to Christ. But what would you say would be one thing that people need to learn how to do, or one thing they need to do to get involved in this work?
I think the one thing that I would say among many is work on learning where the other person is, where they are coming from, so that you know how to lead them to Christ. Because everybody has their own backstory. Everybody has their own package of beliefs or disbeliefs. And it's just a part of loving that person that you truly want to understand them so that you can know what potential hiccups they've had, or challenges they have, or obstacles they have, or questions they have. But first, Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits talks about seek first to understand and then to be understood. It's sort of like be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. So I think taking time to really try to understand where the other person is a crucial component to this.
Very powerful, very powerful. Well, brother, let's say somebody's listening and they want to say, I want to get to know this guy some more. Would you be willing to share your contact information if somebody wanted to reach out to you?
Sure. They can contact me. I'm on Facebook. Just look up my name, Shane Scott, and also on Instagram. I have a blog called thinkingthroughfaith.com, which I had stopped writing after Christy passed away, but recently have kind of started back up in that. And then, of course, they're very happy to email me. My name is Shane Scott, and then the number 829, and then gmail.com. But they'd sure be welcome to follow up.
Well, brother, thank you so much again for spending the time today. And it really is great to see you again. And I don't know, maybe next time I get down to Tampa, we can have lunch or something to reach out and spend a little bit of time together. I would like that.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great. Yeah. Might even invite Jensen. She can join us too if she wants to.
Yeah. And we got to give Jensen the kudos here for helping set this up, because the phone number I had for you was not the right one. And
right.
So anyway, I would appreciate her for all that. But listen, thank you again. Keep up your good work there, and we'll be following up with you. But anyway, thanks again for doing this today.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. You are a big encouragement and motivator to me. So it's great to spend this time with you.
Thanks, brother.
Melt my heart and fill my life. Give me one soul today.